Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee, and I'm a research analyst at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on silver exploration today. We will hear from Jason Weber, President and CEO of Silver North Resources Limited. During today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook, and then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss some fine prints during this Silver North webinar. Forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined in the Silver North corporate presentation, and that can be found on the company's website, silvernorthres.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures pertaining to Silver North. So we have Silver North presenting today. The company was previously named Alianza, but as its name suggests, it is focused on silver exploration in northern Canada. The company has encountered high grades at its 100% owned Haldane project in the central part of the Yukon, and it also has the TIM project in the southern Yukon, where Coeur Mining is funding exploration as part of an earn-in agreement. Just this morning, the company also announced the acquisition of more ground near TIM. And I'm sure that we will learn more about that today. So with that, I now turn it over to Jason to update our audience on the company.
Thanks very much, Timothy, and just like to thank Red Cloud for hosting this webinar. Really excited to be here and tell the Silver North story. And as you kind of touched on there, Tim, we were known as Alianza Minerals a year ago, and it was about this time, May of last year, that we started internally discussing the markets, some of our projects, where things were going. And we really found that we were kind of gravitating towards silver. It helped that our two strongest projects were both silver projects. But as we delved into the silver market and really got a feel for what silver's role was going forward, it really led us, sort of accelerated the process for us to rebrand Alianza, focus on silver, rebrand that, Silver North is our new name, and really focus on the two silver projects. And of course, we just added another 3 claim groups to that today, but all in the Yukon, and we've really taken that and we're running with it and really excited to be moving forward on these fantastic projects. As was outlined, there are forward-looking statements in this presentation. I'm a geologist, so we are very positive by nature, and but there are exploration results that I'll be talking about today that are not necessarily indicative of future results. So looking at the Yukon territory and where our projects are located, we're really focused in at Haldane, which is in the historic Keno Hill mining district, silver district in central part of the Yukon. And then we're also working down in the southern part of the territory, right at the BC Yukon border, in the Silvertip Midway district with our TIM project. I'll talk about both of those, but they both have high grade. We're really fortunate to be working next door to silver producers, Hecla, who runs the Keno silver mine in the Keno district, and Coeur, who we're partnered with, and they're funding exploration at our TIM. Their Silvertip mine project is just 19 kilometers to the south of us on the BC side of the border. What's really exciting about these two projects, they're both road accessible. I'll talk about Mount Haldane first. It's located within the Keno district. So this is a 100-year-old district that's had tremendous amount of exploration and production from it, with almost over 220 million ounces of silver produced from it through its extensive history. We're finding Keno-style veins that are exposed on surface, but we've also made new discoveries at depth and along strike on both known structures that host veins, but also new ones that we've found through our own exploration. These are all open for expansion. And really, when we think about this district and the amount of vein that we have to explore, if you combine the various different veins that we're targeting, you can come up with a combined strike length of 12 kilometers. With only 28 holes drilled from surface so far, we've only tested approximately 600 meters of that. So lots of potential to build on what we've done so far, and lots of room for additional high-grade discoveries and expansion of what we've found to date. This is just a Google Earth image of the Mayo Keno area. Mayo is the closest town of significance with an airstrip. There's sched flights in the summer to service some of the mines in the area. We have the Keno mine, and there's some of the deposits here: Birmingham, Belkeno, Hector Calumet. These are Hector Calumet's an old deposit, but Birmingham, Flame and Moth, Belkeno, those are recently or in current production, all kind of over more towards the Keno City end of the district. And then as you come west towards Mount Haldane, you get into the road off to the Eagle Gold Mine, which is just to the north of us. And you can see the electrical substation there. Great road access right into the property. And this is a very, very active district. There's a few juniors like us exploring in this district. Of course, Hecla with their stronghold on the meat and the historic part of the district where they're currently mining. And then there's been more recent gold exploration. Eagle is in production, just went in a few years ago. And then there's other exploration for gold in this district as well. There's been some small scale historical mining at Haldane, very down low in the valleys. There was some historical mineralization found in the early 1900s. 25 tons of 3,100 grams per ton silver is one example at what was the Middlecoff underground working. So it's been known about for a while, but I'll touch on some of the challenges and why some of the old timers weren't able to continue working here, but and why that's changed and allowing us to make new discoveries on this property. Just a similar view to what you were just looking at, just showing some of the claim positions. It's not entirely accurate. There's been a bit more staking done to fill in some of the empty areas, especially to the south of us. But you can see in light blue, that's Banyan. They're I think it's a 7 million ounce resource, gold resource there that's been defined over the last few years. Eagle in production to the north, gold. And that's really one of the big changes with the exploration that's gone on here in recent years. A lot of it's focused on gold, and it really is now exposing that this is a gold, silver, or silver gold district. And we believe the two styles of mineralization are related genetically. We don't have all the details on how they relate yet. That's in the works, but it's safe to say that when you're in a district like this where you can see multi-million ounce gold deposits, as well as a long history of silver, it's a dynamic system. It's big and it's productive, and those are some of the key points that when you're exploring, especially in a somewhat brownfields district, if you can make new discoveries within that, it really bodes well for your ability to find economic silver deposits, as in our case. Here's a geological map of the same area. You can see the Haldane property here on the left-hand side of this image. What's really key for us in the silver exploration space is that light blue or steel blue kind of gray unit that runs through roughly the center of this image. That's the basal quartzite member of the Keno Hill quartzite formation. That is host to much of the mineralization, silver mineralization that is, that's been found to date in the district. And it's really a physical property of this unit. It breaks nicely to form veins. So you get these structures that they have the ability to, they're very brittle. They open up nice and wide to providing a pathway for fluids to course through and then deposit the silver-bearing mineralization within them. So it's a really key unit when you're exploring for Keno-style silver veins, and we have a good exposure of that at the Haldane property on the western side of the district. Just zooming into the property itself, kind of the core of the property is where much of the silver vein mineralization had been found to date. In fact, that's where the old timers first found mineralization here back in between 1905 and kind of 1916 time frame. We call this the Mount Haldane vein system, series of somewhat parallel, subparallel veins, structures that host veins. And we've made numerous discoveries along these structures, with the most recent being, and probably the most significant to date, being the West Fault. You can also see the Main and Main South. Drilling actually was targeting the main zone when the West Fault was discovered. So this was a blind structure, was not known prior to drilling the initial hole back in 2011 that identified the structure. And they were targeting the main zone. So there is potential for more of these styles or finds where we don't necessarily see vein mineralization at surface, and West Fault's an excellent example of that. Just at the southern part of the photo, or the bottom, especially on the left side, you can see it better, is Johnson and Middlecoff. Those are two of the areas where the old timers were able to find silver mineralization on surface that they were able to go underground on. This is a view looking down Bighorn Creek. We're looking off to the northwest. This is through the heart of that Mount Haldane vein system. You can see Middlecoff and Johnson down low in the valley. And the reason the old timers were able to find fresh silver-bearing mineralization here is you can see the broad valley in the background. There was glaciation up that valley, and that went through the main part of the Keno district, but really kind of stopped at Mount Haldane. So in the main part of the Keno district, such as where Hecla is mining right now, the heavily weathered and oxidized upper portions of the veins was scraped away by the ice. Here, you only had a very little bit of that. So most of our vein mineralization on surface is weathered and oxidized. Hard to pick out. You don't, when you sample it, you don't necessarily get true representations of what the original vein mineralization was. But down in the valley bottom, at such as Middlecoff and Johnson, they were able to find this very near surface, and were able to find some very high grade mineralization, as you can see in these two areas. When you move up the hillside, there's evidence that there was mineralization. It tends to be muted. You don't get the same high grades. But when you test these at depth, as we've seen with the West Fault, you can get, in these productive vein systems, very high grades, as shown here, 3 meters of over 1,300 grams per ton silver. That's at the West Fault. And you can see the drill collars were much higher up on the hillside here. And then if you look back down the valley at the Bighorn area, it's right on our road that comes into this valley. And that's an area that we made a brand new discovery based off some soil geochemistry that we had done over much of the property. The old timers weren't able to find this mineralization. It's largely covered. And that's what we were able to do using soil geochem techniques and then drilling at depth. Find brand new Keno style vein systems 3 kilometers away from any known mineralization. And then in the background, you can see the road off to the Eagle Gold Mine off to the north of us. Just looking at the West Fault area itself, we've really identified mineralization over about 100 meters of strike and 90 meters down dip, with some fantastic mineralization. It's a mix of, we're getting some nice high grade mineralization, over 8 meters of 311 grams per ton silver. That was in our quote unquote discovery hole that we drilled in 2020. That was hole 19. That was followed up with a series of holes that were a mix of narrower but much higher grade mineralization, and then a bit of a transition from one vein that was sort of lower in the structure to veins that were higher in the structure. And we were able to start to get a handle on these two different levels of veins, for lack of a better term. And we've got a good handle on where to follow this mineralization. Going off to the southwest and down dip is the new target direction, or preferred target direction from us. Targeting largely the lower structural level, which our most southwesterly hole 24 shown on here, is one of the highest grade intersections that we have to date. It was highlighted by 1.26 meters of 3,267 grams per ton silver. So very nice high grades. We kind of use 300 grams per ton silver as a cutoff here. And we want to see that over 2, 3, 4 meters. That's what you would see next door. What Hecla is kind of using as their cutoff, that 300 gram mark. So anything above 300 grams per ton silver, we consider in the realm of potentially being economic if we can find a big enough deposit or concentration of this mineralization. That's kind of benchmark for us as we explore these veins. So this is looking perpendicular to that previous photo. We're looking northeast now, and just showing some of the drill collars and where this mineralization was intersected from, where those drill holes were placed. I've also shown on here in yellow some of the proposed drill holes and collar locations for the next round of drilling. What's really interesting here, from my perspective, is the fact that you have at the West Fault no superficial mineralization. There is a notch. You can sort of see it in the top of the ridge there, where the West Fault goes all the way up the ridge, but you don't ever see silver mineralization anywhere through that draw, through that valley that runs down the side of the hill. Yet you go a few hundred meters to the right and you hit the main fault, where we actually do see silver mineralization on surface. For example, there was a chip sample that was taken that's 3.6 meters wide and had 223 grams per ton silver on it. So one might look at that and say, well, it's not ore grade. But what we're seeing there is perhaps a muted response. This has been weathered. You wouldn't see necessarily the silver grades that you would when you hit the fresh material at depth. And this is really indicated by the fact that the lead values with this and the main zone south and then the main zone itself with 0.6% lead, that means there's very little galena there. And galena is the lead mineral that hosts much of the silver mineralization here. So the more galena you have, the more lead you have, it's likely the more silver you're going to get. So when we see those low concentrations of lead, but we're still getting some good silver numbers there, that's promising for us. And especially when you look over back to the West Fault and say that stuff didn't even have mineralization on surface that was visible. The main fault is another bona fide sort of West Fault quality target that we have. And in fact, we have one hole here, the lower of the 4 proposed holes, that would aim to go through the West Fault and then on into the main fault and test both of those structures in one drill hole. So that's a really exciting target for us, both to build on the main fault, West Fault, but also to investigate the main fault at depth. And there was some previous drilling that was done here in 2011. Hole 6 probably hit still within the oxidized zone. When you look at the core, it still looks oxidized and rubbly. It hit 62 grams silver, and that's an interesting hole, but we think as you get down to depth in the fresh mineralization, that'll be much more exciting. Here's just this is a long section. It's cut in the plane of the vein. So on the right hand side here, we're kind of looking at the vein front on, and you can see hole 24 in the dark purple. That's one of the highest grade holes that we've hit to date. And as you can see in the green, we're aiming to investigate that mineralization as we continue down to down dip into the southwest. And you can see the one hole up Up higher, that's the hole that will test the west fault and then go through on into the main fault. We're probably hitting the west fault too high in that hole, but that's the only way we can make that hole work, is hit higher up in the west fault and get the main fault down in the fresh sulfide. As I mentioned, we had a new discovery at Bighorn. This was actually made in 2019. Bighorn, you can see in the red star here, is about 3 kilometers away from the west and main fault area. Soil geochem was done through this area, highlighted by a 63 gram per ton silver sample. It had over 1% lead in it. That's in a soil, that's not rock. So that was pretty exciting for us. We put a hole just along strike from that. We'd seen some veins or structures in trenching. We drilled a hole, and to be honest, we were a little bit disappointed. We had 125 grams per ton silver over 2.3 meters. That was interesting, but not certainly ore grade. When we talked to our friends over at what was then Alexco Resources prior to Hecla taking them over, the geologist there got really excited and said, "You've made a brand new discovery. Anytime you can see vein mineralization with the right alteration like we've seen here, that's a significant intersection, and you could be 50 meters away from ore grade mineralization with an intersection like that." So that was really encouraging for us to hear, knowing these guys are the experts in exploring and developing these vein systems. So with over a 525 meters of strike length here, and within an overall 900 meter long soil geochemical anomaly, we feel there's great potential to build on this and hit some ore grade silver mineralization in drilling. So this will be a target for our upcoming drill program as well. Just to touch on our plans this summer, we really would be looking at starting here at the Tim sometime in June. Our partner Coeur will be funding that drilling. Their target date is later in June to get that program going, and that's largely weather dependent. It looks like it should be doable based on the way the snow is going. They are funding $3.5 million in exploration over 5 years. There's cash payments of almost $600,000 coming to us, stage payments, and they have to complete a feasibility study by the 8th anniversary, and that'll bring their interest in the project up to 80%. So this is fantastic in that we have Coeur, who's the expert in looking for CRD type deposits, which this is what we're postulating here at Tim. That's what their Silvertip project is, just 19 kilometers to the south. So it really helps to have that team, that technical team involved and running that exploration at Tim. And then just jumping back to Haldane for a second, we'd look to start Haldane probably late July, early August to get that drilling going. And we really do have the luxury of drilling late into the year at Haldane. So it's a nice way for us to stage our drill programs, get continuous news flow, and allow us to focus on one and then the other through the exploration season. So the Tim property is located west of Watson Lake. It's right at the BC Yukon border. We did announce this morning the acquisition of 3 new claim groups. We call it the GDR project from a prospecting syndicate. One of the properties is right adjacent to Tim, just to the west. The other 2 properties, you can see the Alaska Highway runs east-west just above Tim. The other 2 claim groups are north of that highway, about 10 kilometers. So I don't have a map of those yet, but there's the 3 claim groups, all targeting the similar style of mineralization as Silvertip, this carbonate replacement deposits that Coeur has been very, very effective in adding silver resources to at their Silvertip mine over the last few years. This is zoomed into the Tim property. There's been a series of trenches that were done in the 1980s. Coeur has confirmed the results of those programs, actually getting better results than what was seen in some of the trenching that was done back then, highlighted by 4 meters of 468 grams per ton silver with 21% lead and 0.3% zinc. This is obviously the main target of the drilling that we do here. And in fact, there's been 6 pads that Coeur has outlined for the 2024 program. They'll test this mineralization at depth. They're all kind of lined up along strike that parallel to the sort of the orientation of these trenches. Interesting result they got is a very wide zone, almost 9 meters of 265 grams per ton silver. That something that hadn't been seen before. So Coeur's done a fantastic job here doing additional soil geochemistry mapping, prospecting, some geophysics, and really feel that there's a lot of similarities between the setup here at the geological setup here at Tim as compared to what they're seeing at Silvertip. So exciting project for us, having that expertise from Coeur on this funding and running the exploration programs here. I think is a great benefit for us. So the project that we just acquired to the west would just be off the map here, and just to the northwest, kind of on the same trending off to the northwest as what we see with these trenches. Going off this way, we'd see mineralization, up in, or not mineralization, but soil geochem that's never been explained. And this is one of the really things that really intrigued us about this property, is that soil geochem was done and it's never been followed up. There's no source for this high lead, zinc, silver soil geochem that's been seen there. So that's a priority target for us when we get on the ground exploring that newly acquired claim group. So just to sum up, why Silver North? I think with being the early days of what we think is a silver bull market, I think having drill programs that are ongoing and providing our investors with quality exposure to discovery opportunities is I think really what gives us an advantage. We're next door to significant silver producers in Hecla, and partnered with Coeur on the Tim. And I think, being in established silver districts, there's this favorable jurisdiction. It's an excellent place to be exploring for this metal. And just taking a step back and looking at silver, when we looked at the silver market and how silver is factored into the green transition, it was really apparent that silver is a critical metal. It is such a big component of solar panels. In fact, some of the newest solar panel technologies are actually using 1 to 1.5 to 2 times more silver per panel than what some of the older technologies are. And that silver, that solar panel draw on the silver market is just ever increasing every year. Not to mention the fact that it's used in all kinds of high-tech components that we use in our lives every day now. We only see that industrial demand for silver growing. So we really feel that the silver market's an excellent place to be. I think this has been borne out by the fact that our stock price has really responded well in the silver uptick. We've doubled over the last sort of 6 weeks and held that quite nicely. Whereas I think maybe some of the gold juniors haven't had that response. So I think that's just one tell that maybe the silver market is a fantastic place to be right now. This is our chart. You can see sort of from the beginning of March through April, that share price performance kind of in step with the silver market. We have a very tight share structure with under 50 million shares outstanding. We know where most of that stock is held. Management board and some close funds that we're very close to own over 25% of the stock, and a good mix between retail, high net worth private individuals, and funds. So something that we've worked on is building some of these relationships that have allowed some of these investors who've been with us for a long time through the downturn and are still there supporting us today. I think speaks highly of the work that we've done to cultivate these shareholders, but also speaks highly of the projects that we have and what we're exploring in the Silver North portfolio. I'll just touch on the team briefly. Myself, I'm a geologist, president, CEO. We have Rob Duncan, who's got lots of experience in early and advanced stage exploration. And then Mark Brown, who's our chairman. Mark and I lead the fundraising efforts and sort of on the financial side. Rob and I lead the technical side together. And it's a good grouping of the three of us to move our projects forward. Then we have our directors in Mark Blythe and Craig Lindsay, who bring mine engineering experience, and Craig with a great deal of financial background, both in and out of the mining and exploration industry, and Winnie Wong, who's our CFO, who's really keeps us on the straight and narrow as far as regulatory and financial reporting. Again, great backdrop for us. When we find something, Mark's able to tell us if we're in the realm, if that's something that can be a mine. It's a great resource to have in our exploration. This is how you can contact us through both our website and our social media channels. And I think I'll hand it back to you, Tim, if there's any questions.
Great. Thank you, Jason, for the very informative presentation. We will now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. A reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We already do have a few questions. First, can you tell us a bit more about the drilling that Coeur plans at Tim this year?
Yeah, that's a good. I actually meant to add that in. There's Coeur's looking at doing about 2,000 meters of drilling at Tim. So it'll be they've got 6 pads outlined, not necessarily using all 6 of those drill pads, but it kind of gives them some flexibility, targeting off those trenches that had the high-grade mineralization. Again, kind of like Haldane, even though there's some really nice high-grade mineralization there that was found on surface, it tends to be a bit spotty. And so where the galena is preserved is where you get the high-grade silver. They were probably luckier in their trenching than they were back in the 80s in finding some of that preserved galena. So the idea is to get this stuff down at depth where it's more fresh material that you'd be testing. So that's going to sort of define the drilling, and what they probably have a better handle on it than I do, what the depth of weathering is here based on what they see at their projects to the south. But I suspect that they probably want to hit this mineralization 50 or 70 meters down deep. So 6 pads, 2,000 meters of drilling. They have to spend $700,000 this year as under our agreement. So 2,000 meters would probably fit right in about that $700,000 expenditure range.
Okay, great. And looking at Haldane, what are you doing differently at Haldane that allows you to make new discoveries in a district that has a long history of prospecting and mining?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question we get quite often. And probably the biggest thing is that when this mineralization was found in the district, of course, Elsa at the time was the central sort of spoke or hub for the spokes in the district. So that's about 20 kilometers from where the core of the work at Haldane is. And because you're in a valley, surrounded by mountains, you actually have to drive out and around. And so back in the early 1900s with horse and carriage, that was a difficult task. You would have had to really find high grade mineralization and make that worthwhile. So Haldane kind of got forgotten about. And the fact that they didn't find much more high grade silver on surface there would have been a deterrent. But of course, now we know with the glacial history there that that main part of the district has been scraped off quite nicely, allowing those old timers to find that mineralization on surface. Really made it apparent to us that okay, what we're dealing with is just, you don't see the mineralization at surface necessarily because it's been so weathered and oxidized. You might see remnants of it, but the old timers wouldn't have, it just wouldn't have been high enough grade for them to continue with it. So obviously with soil geochemical techniques, we're able to look for these subtle changes in not just silver, but sort of some of the other elements that we find in trace amounts with Keno style mineralization to use us to vector into some of these structures. And of course, using techniques to identify these structures is a real big part of it too, and that's some of the greatest advances that have been made over the last sort of 5 years, and this is a tribute to the good technical work that Hecla's exploration team is doing, is the understanding of those structures and how they interact, and where the best places to find mineralization are on them. Is that understanding has really grown in the last 5 years even. So that's some of the advantages we have now that they wouldn't have had 100 years ago.
Great. And how about your other projects? Obviously, you had kind of the previous business model where you had more prospect generating, and you still no doubt have some of those projects in the portfolio. Are you still actively looking for partners? Are you obliged to do work on some of those properties to maintain your licenses and so on?
Yeah, it's a combo of both. Some of them we are working to find partners for. In the case of Twin Canyon, which in the release we announced today, we've actually given that back to the underlying vendors. Part of it being, there's an intellectual capital that you expend trying to find partners for these projects, and we just looked at it. That vendor's probably got a better chance of finding somebody else to come in on it than we do. We just couldn't spend the proper amount of time to find a partner. We'd rather focus on what we're doing on these projects in the Yukon. And so, there were some payments coming up. And so it was just, the logical thing was to return them to the underlying vendor. In other cases, we don't have any outstanding expenditures to be made, especially some of our other Yukon projects. And then others we've dealt off to smaller groups to do work on, generally just giving them up 100%. We really feel that there was a strong stratification between the projects that we have in the Yukon that are silver targets and the other ones in the portfolio. So that's we've just focused on those. Those are going to be the best bang for our buck. Best value for exploration is exploring those. So we're kind of limiting the amount of time we spend on the other ones.
Okay. Now this next part is kind of a multi-part question, a little bit of a loaded question in a way, but obviously you have two majors in the silver space as neighbors, and you have a relationship with Coeur on the Tim project. And talking about other companies a little here, but no doubt you keep your eye a little bit on what they're doing. How are things going there at Silvertip? Are they quite active? Is it a big focus for them? And if so, obviously that would spill over to the Tim project and their level of continuing interest there.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that they went through a bit of a hard time at the mine when they took it on, and they had some problems with their mill. It's just not quite set up properly for the mineralization that they were mining. So as they get that fixed, they've gone out and done a ton of exploration. They've brought on advice in from some of the CRD experts. Peter McGaw has been on the property there, and Dr. McGaw is well known as a CRD expert, and he spoke very highly. I haven't heard him say it, but I've heard from others that he quite liked what he saw at Silvertip, and they've added. I don't have the number offhand, but they've added a significant amount of silver resources to the portfolio there, and I think they're feeling quite good about their knowledge, their understanding of the system, and are eager to take that and apply it at Tim. They're excited to get drilling underway there. It's and exploration of this district, it's a priority for them. They raised I think it was $25 million in flow through earlier this year to be spent in BC and the Yukon. We're the only Yukon project they have. So that would say that, you know, they're going to spend 700,000 of that 25 million there, and who knows if a discovery is made, maybe more. So they've been quite successful in growing their silver resources there, and they have such a good understanding of that CRD system. It's great to have them applying that at Tim. So yeah, we're pretty excited to be partnered with them, and I think they're pretty excited to get drilling at Tim.
Great. Now, similarly, you don't necessarily have a formal relationship with Hecla, but you're neighbors with them at Keno Hill. How are things? Do you know how things are going at Keno Hill? And, you know, it sort of leads to a little bit again to something where maybe they're keeping an eye on what you're doing. You know, if you have a sizable discovery there.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because we got to know the Alexco exploration team before, back before Hecla took Alexco over, and they were a fantastic group, really willing to share knowledge and help us out. A couple times we got into a jam, with logistics wise, they were there to help us out. So we've had a really good relationship with that team since day one. And when Hecla came in, they kept that whole team on, and they speak very highly of that group that was there and doing the work, and have kind of fostered them to sort of tell the story a little bit more. They gave a talk here in Vancouver in mid-February, and I kind of alluded to it in my talk, that just based on their new understanding of the structural framework of the Keno vein systems. And it was really enlightening. And they're quite excited to share that knowledge, and they're proud of the team and what they've been doing there. And it's been evidenced by their exploration results. They've been hitting extremely high grade mineralization at depths not previously thought to be prospective for high grade silver. And the old mantra in the district was that as you went deeper on these veins, they became zinc rich. They transitioned from zinc or from silver to zinc deposits. And perhaps maybe this is part of the problem that Alexco had, is that the exploration team proved that wasn't true. They were hitting more and more high grade at depth. And so one of the things they talked about in their talk in February was the fact that there is a zonation, but it's more to do with your distance from the main plumbing structures, the main structures that the fluids are primarily flowing through, rather than like a vertical zonation. So it can be many different orientations. So that's kind of a key, because at Haldane, because we have that erosion or oxidation of the upper parts of the systems, some could have argued that, well, as you go deeper, you're going to get more zinc-rich mineralization, and that's been totally disproven. We think the roots of these systems go quite deep now, and there's lots of potential to grow these deposits in a vertical sense. Some of the deepest holes that Hecla is drilling now are like spectacular grades, like kilograms of silver per ton. Like they're spectacular grades of silver. So I think that bodes really well for us. So we have a great relationship with that technical team, but their Hecla's senior management, they're not a very big team, and I've known a couple of their senior management for a few decades here in Vancouver, and got to know some of the others just in the process of them becoming our neighbors. So while there's nothing formal there, I think we have a good relationship where we talk every once in a while. It's keep up to speed with what they're doing.
Okay, great.
And them us.
Great. And so kind of follow on here, but a little bit of a loaded question, but not. It's a question I often ask companies thinking about the business model, your own backgrounds on the exploration side. If you do have a significant discovery, on one of your projects? Would the ultimate end game be to sell to an established producer, or would you look to, would you look to become a mining company yourself?
Well, I think, we've seen geologists become miners. I don't necessarily think it's a recipe for success. My passion is the early stage, making those discoveries. If Silver North were to transition into a mining company, I'm probably not the one to run it, and I would be the first to admit that. But in the stage of finding, discovering, and then sort of developing something that's going to become interesting to somebody who can mine it, whether that's Hecla or a new management team here, I think that's where my expertise and Rob, our VP, that's where we're really comfortable, and that's the best use of our skill set, and obviously then that's the best case for our shareholders. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious that if we found something, Hecla would be first choice as someone to acquire it. But I think we also have to look big enough, and we do feel strongly that we could find standalone silver deposits here, and I think that's a key for us, is that we're not looking for 10 to 15 million ounces of silver that we can go and sell to Hecla. We're looking for 50 million to 100 million ounces of silver. Whether we can find that, that is the question that we're trying to answer, but we think that potential exists there. And I think if you look at what's going on in the rest of the district, largely with Hecla, they're really showing that this district and maybe the vertical extent show it to be much bigger than the 220 million ounces that's been mined over its history.
Great. Well, I think that's all the questions we have, although I'll ask one kind of a closer here. You had talked about some of the plans going forward, but kind of to review, what are some key milestones or key activities and plans coming up over the next months?
Yeah, I think as we roll into the exploration season here, that startup of drilling in June at Tim with Coeur funding and running that program, that's obviously a big milestone for us, first drill program there. And then followed up by our drilling at Haldane. It's sometime later in the summer. Like I say, we really do have that flexibility of when we start. And one of the things that not just us, but all exploration companies are kind of thinking about now is, when do you start your programs? Because what we've seen in the last few years with the forest fire situation is that July and August can be difficult months to work in. In fact, in the Mayo area last year, midsummer, there was a number of fires right in around the Mayo area, and it closed off a lot of access. So there are some advantages to working later in the season when that fire season has somewhat slowed down. So that's a consideration these days. That's just the way it is. But because we have road access, we can work well into December, and we've done that before. It's hard to start up in the winter, but if we've been active and we can just transition a camp from a summer fall camp into winter, it can be done, and we're able to work much later. So we look at starting that program, end of July, early August is kind of what we're thinking in the back of our minds right now. And then that gives us great news flow right through till the end of the year, probably. And so when you're thinking about it from that perspective, it keeps us top of mind, and it's great for our investors as they can keep up to hopefully some high grade drill holes. And then you kind of sprinkle in with that. We've probably looked at 30 projects over the last 4 or 5 months. We just acted on the one set there. There's another one we're quite interested in that we're kind of in negotiations on. We'll see if anything happens there, but there's potential for some other acquisitions that would really complement what we're doing. So you can kind of throw that into the mix as well.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to again thank Jason Weber for presenting the Silver North story today. And thank you everyone on the line for tuning in. Please join us tomorrow when our Red Cloud webinar series continues with Aston Minerals presenting Wednesday, May 15th at 9:00 a.m. Eastern Time. Have a great rest of your day.